Chris Johnson, CEO of the Urban Taskforce here. We've just done a detailed study with a group called McCrindle into the Sydney lifestyle study. This is really to look at a comparison between those living in apartments and those living in houses, detached houses. And we've done this because it seems to be quite a swing towards apartment living. So what we've done is we've gone back to 1991. And this is the structure back in 1991 that shows the balance between people living in apartments, people living in townhouses, and people living in detached houses. And as you'll see from this, 68% were in detached houses. But fast forward to 2016, and you will see that 68 has dropped down to 55%. So there's a bit of a trend away from living in detached houses towards living in apartments. And what McCrindle, who've done this study for us, have found is if we project forward to 2024, the detached houses go down to 49%. So they are becoming less than half of the total stock. Here's the way they present that. So you can see it's clearly half basically of the houses in Sydney in 2024 will be detached houses and half will be urban dense houses, a mixture of both apartments and townhouses. But it's interesting to look at how that would project forward to 40 years' time. So if we look at 2057, amazingly that detached housing component has dropped right down to 25%. And apartments up to 50%. Now this is a very broad sort of cut as to what might happen, but McCrindle believe this is the general trend, general direction that Sydney is heading. A fundamental change if one thinks that 25% used to be 68% back in 1991. So we need to look somewhat at who lives in the apartments and how this comes together. So to do this, McCrindle have done a very detailed study. This outlines the methodology. We've used the ABS data from the 2016 census, but we've also done an online survey in Sydney to a combination of people. It's a mixture of people living in apartments and those living in detached houses. So this gives us the relativity of the different types of people living. Now there's a really interesting number that is shown here. This shows the current average price of a house in Sydney in 2017, $1,177,000. Yet only 10 years ago that was $524,000, half that amount. This is what's driving a lot of the swing away from this type of housing. It's just so expensive. People are looking at other ways of living rather than hanging on to the dream of trying to raise that much money to buy an individual house. The result of that, as shown in the research, is a trend away from home ownership. This is looking at the 18 to 39-year-old group of people, and you can see here the drop in home ownership from 36% in 2002 down to 25% in 2014. So there's clearly a swing on for younger people to not be moving into homes. But what a lot of them are doing is actually renting. So what this shows from our current data is that 63% of people in Sydney are actually renting in the apartments, and 18% of people living in houses are renting. So just to clarify that, this is 63% of all the people living in apartments are renting, and 18% of all the people living in houses are renting. So a lot more people in apartments are renters rather than owners. It's also interesting that a lot of the people in the apartments say they are more interested in experiences than wealth accumulation. In fact, 72% of the people in apartments believe it's better to have a good lifestyle, living where they want to live, rather than just see the home as something to increase value, to make more money. The lifestyle and location actually therefore supersede the financial decision making. So you can see here that the percentage of people who own or rent their current home for lifestyle and location reasons, so this is only for lifestyle and location, 66% are in apartments, 71% are in houses. So there's obviously a drive here to lifestyle and location, not just financial, in how people live. But the really interesting thing we wanted to do was look at who are the different groups living in apartments in Sydney. And this wheel indicates the combination of people back in 1991. You'll see here the 4 fundamental groups of couples with no children, 21%. Couples with children, 14%. 9% are single parents, 41% lone people, and 11% are group households. But this has changed by 2016. You can look at how that has actually modified. So by 2016, the 21% couples is 27. The 14% couples with children is now 20. Single parents are 8. Lone persons 34%. If we look forward to 2024, you'll see that this has changed even more. So that 28% are now couples with no children, 24% couples with children, 8% single parents, 28% lone parents, and another group of households, or group households, number of people living in one apartment, are 10%. So we decided we would look at 4 of these groups. We've looked at vertical families, and this chart gives a bit of a window into who the people are living in the vertical family areas. 20% at the moment of apartment households. 64% are aged 23 to 37, so most of them. 61% are renting, 51% are employed full-time. Interesting, the political preference, 52% would vote for the Labor Party, and large numbers live in Sydney's northwest and southwest. In fact, here are the top 10 suburbs. So you can see the suburbs that the vertical families live in across Sydney. So it goes from Parramatta, Bankstown, Westmead and onwards. The second group we looked at is Cosmo couples. Cosmo couples are before having kids, basically, so just 2 people living in an apartment. They represent 27% of apartment households, 43% are aged 23 to 37, 43% employed full-time, and 52% own their own apartment. 36% of these would vote for the coalition, so a different political complexion. And here are the suburbs that this group lives in. So you can see here the inner city suburbs generally, Randwick, Parramatta, Dee Why, Sydney. The third group are the solo metropolites. This is solo people living in apartments, and there are quite a lot of these people. There's 34% now for apartment householders, 37% 53 to 71, 63% renters. You can see the work percentages there, and 40% of this group would vote for the Labor Party. And here are the 10 suburbs that relate to that particular area group, Mossman, and heading on down to a series of other suburbs. And finally, the one-parent families. This is a smaller group, 8%, but it seems to be growing, of overall apartment dwellers. 49% are aged 38 to 57, 78% are renting, 39% full-time. And they often vote more Labor as well, 42% do that. Then their suburbs, Liverpool, Bankstown, Dee Why, are listed on this here. So we've tried to look in detail at these different demographic groups. It's very important that we understand the groups who live in this way in Sydney's apartments, and we're going to come out with more detailed studies as we push this work through so that the broader community can understand just who lives in Sydney's apartments.